Welcome back, ladies and gents. As always, I am Matt. If you guys are looking for some hiking and backpacking content, you guys have come to the right place. If that's your thing, click on the subscribe button over here. I do a ton of different videos on backpacking gear and backpacking tips, and I showcase some pretty amazing places in the gorgeous Canadian Rockies. So like I said, if that's your thing, subscribe button over there. That's for you. Today we are going to talk about trekking poles, and more specifically we are going to talk the Trek Z 2.0 trekking pole from Trekology. Before we dive into the specifics on the Trek Z 2.0 pole, I thought it would kind of give a little bit of overview on why I use trekking poles and why I think you could be using trekking poles, and sort of why trekking poles are beneficial for anybody out doing hiking and backpacking. A little bit about myself: I've been backpacking for about 20 years now. And for years and years, I went with either no pole whatsoever, or I used just a traditional hiking stick. Where a stick or a pole really comes in handy, obviously, is giving yourself an extra point of contact with the ground. So be it using a single pole, if you want to go use two poles and sort of have that 4 points of contact when you're out there on trail, whatever works for you, whatever is most comfortable for you. To make things easier and make me feel like I have less things in my hands and less stuff going on, we're just going to showcase one of the poles here, but they do come in a set of two when you pick up the Trek Z poles from Trekology. Now, where trekking poles really come in handy, like I said, is giving yourself an extra point of contact with the ground. And places where that is going to be extremely beneficial to you out on trail is things like water crossings. Having a trekking pole for a water crossing, especially a deeper one, is huge. When you get some of these crazy currents that are pushing you a little bit, and just having something to brace yourself on the rocks and not just rely on your feet, so when you're taking a step you still got 2 or 3 points of contact. Trekking poles are also extremely beneficial when you're going downhill. I've got really bad knees after years of extreme sports and snowboarding and hockey and soccer and all those crazy things I did when I was younger. My knees are in pretty rough shape, and trekking poles have been a game changer for me, especially when going downhill. And I only ever use one trekking pole, but I find even just having one pole just helps alleviate that little bit of stress when you're coming downhill, and you can plant your pole in front of you and kind of lower yourself down, and you're not taking all the brunt of your weight, and you're not taking all those forces on your knees. Another reason why trekking poles can be beneficial to you is actually saving weight out of your backpack. Where trekking poles have benefited me by cutting weight out of my backpack is for those backpacking trips when I can't take my hammock out and I'm going to take my tent. I use a single pole tent, a little teepee style tent, and I use a trekking pole as the pole of my tent. So if you use a trekking pole tent, obviously having a set of trekking poles is going to be a no-brainer, and it's going to save you weight in the long run because you're not carrying poles as you would with a traditional backpacking tent. But with that out of the way, let's dive into the Trek Z 2.0 trekking pole by Trekology. They are a fantastic budget option. Last I checked, you can pick these poles up on Amazon for about 40 bucks Canadian, and I will put links in the description box down below where you guys can find the Trekology trekking poles on Amazon. It comes in a set of 2 poles. They come with a bunch of different little accessories and stuff with them, so awesome value for a extremely sturdy trekking pole. Now, when you've got the trekking poles broken down sort of into their more like storage mode, I guess if you want to call it, they are a pretty small form factor. They're a little over 1 foot in length and maybe about 1.5 to 2 inches in girth, I guess. Wow, I just said girth in a backpacking video. Way to go, Matty. Now, when you want to assemble these poles, you just have the little Velcro tabby here, which is super convenient, keeps everything kind of organized, and then you drop it down. Now, as you will notice, they are in 3 different sections, and you have a little plastic lined cable running through the middle. So to assemble these poles, you go to the handle end here, and you'll see you've got 2 little silver spots here. The bottom one you just grab and start sliding out. And as you slide that guy and connect it, the poles will all connect together, and you'll see a little line here on the trekking pole. If you just continue to pull, a little stopper will come out. You only got 1 point of adjustment up here, which you've got a little flip lock, and you've got little measurements, so you can adjust them quite long. They go from 130 centimeters down to 110 centimeters. I like about these having just the single flip lock and the single adjustment point, because the rest of the pole here is all slid in together and it's not going to collapse on itself. Is you only have one possible point of failure. Other trekking poles out there with the multiple flip locks or the little twist locks and stuff, have 2 to 3 different spots where you've got a point of potential failure where the poles can collapse in on each other, and when that happens to you, it absolutely sucks. I've actually only used this trekking pole out of the set of two. Like I said, it comes in a set of two, and I only use one trekking pole, so I've only actually used this one trekking pole. But I've got a couple 100 kilometers worth of hiking on this pole and no issues with it whatsoever. So when you want to adjust the slide lock, you just sort of, you know, adjust it up to whatever height setting you want and whatever's comfortable for you. And then you have this little tightening knob here. You just tighten that down to give the flip lock some tension, and you are good to go. Now at the top here, you've got your primary handle, obviously, that you're going to be hanging onto, and you've got this secondary foam handle down below. By the way, as we're talking about handles, actual cork handles here, they're not fake cork handles. Huge bonus. I know a lot of people like the cork handles. I'm personally a big fan of cork handle trekking poles. I find that I don't get any blister or hot spot issues on my hands. If I'm using foam trekking poles, I find that I will get little hot spots in the crook of my hand here, but with the cork handle trekking poles, that is not an issue whatsoever. One thing to really watch out for with cork handle trekking poles is porcupines. If you hike in an area where there's porcupines, they are notorious for eating the cork off the handle of your trekking poles. I believe it's got something to do with the salt content in our sweat, and when your hands are sweating, it'll absorb into the cork a little bit. But porcupines up here in the Canadian Rockies at least are notorious for chewing the cork handles off your trekking poles. So just something you'll have to keep in mind, and something you'll have to, you know, think about when it comes to putting your trekking poles away at night, is not just leaving them under the vestibule of your tent. I know a lot of people will just stab them into the ground and leave them standing up like that. That seems to help a lot. But just something to keep in mind. As I mentioned before, it's got this secondary foam handle down below. Now what this handle is for is when you're going uphill, it gives you a spot where you can choke down on the trekking pole. So obviously you'll pull your hand out of the little wrist holder here, which, as I'm talking about the wrist holder, is extremely comfortable. It's just a, you know, nice little 1-inch thick strap of webbing. It's very soft. It is adjustable, so you've got this little tail here you can pull and, you know, adjust the length on that for whatever's comfortable for you. But you'll just, you know, when you're going uphill, slide your hand out of there, grab the secondary pole, and it just gives you a spot you can kind of choke up on the trekking pole. If you're going uphill in a little bit more technical sections, tends to work really well. We'll talk about the weight a little bit here. Just the single pole alone is 10.5 ounces or 290 grams. You can go a little bit lighter if you want to go for some of the carbon fiber designs and different materials out there. Personally, a fan of the aluminum trekking poles. I found with the carbon ones in the past, anytime you put tension on them, they can snap. And when the carbon ones snap, they're done for. The nice thing with the aluminum ones is if they get a little bit bent out of shape, you can usually kind of bend them back. Now, I've had no bending issues with these poles yet. So after a year of use, you know, they are still in extremely good shape. It does have a really nice carbide tip. Now you can see it still has tons of grip here on the carbide tip on these poles. Like I said, I've got a couple 100 kilometers worth of backpacking on these poles. You know, you can see they are pretty dirty and a little bit beat up down at the bottom, but that carbide tip is showing no signs of wearing out, and that is going over some pretty jagged, rough rocks up here in the Rockies. They also do come with some accessories. Now, the only accessory I actually have with these trekking poles is the snow baskets. They come with larger snow baskets. That comes with 2 of them, and then 2 smaller baskets. I actually gave out the 2 smaller baskets to a couple friends of mine for their trekking poles. I don't ever tend to use the smaller baskets, so I didn't really feel a need to keep them for myself. But to put the snow basket on, it's got threads on the bottom of the pole, and you just twist the basket on and you are good to go. It gives you a much wider footprint when you're, you know, going through some powdery snow and doing some snowshoeing and stuff like that. I've used the snow baskets on some winter trips and they've worked perfectly. And I do believe the trekking poles also came with those little foot things. I don't know, the little like rubber caps to put on the bottoms of them for if you're doing like street walking and that kind of thing. I don't do any of that kind of stuff with my trekking poles, and I've just kind of misplaced those, but I'm pretty sure they came with the little foot piggies down at the bottom here. So if that's something you're looking for, they do come with that as well. So it pretty much covers most of the little features on the Trekology trekking poles. Like I said, I've been using these for about a year now and have had 0 issues with them whatsoever. These so far have been hands down the best trekking pole option that I have found, sort of in that budget category. And that's stacking up against some McKinley trekking poles and the Cascade Mountain trekking poles that people seem to love from Costco. But if you're looking for more budget backpacking gear besides just trekking poles, I've got a couple different budget backpacking gear videos, and I'll fire those right here for you. So when you're done with this video, check out either one of those. I'll see you over there. As always, I'm Matty. Thank you so dang much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.